Hello,
drop it in our
people
chat.
of the internet. It is I, Elf Queen. Yes, finally a face reveal. Joining me today on this Interviews with YouTubers special edition, author Lydia Sherrer.
Hi guys.
So, hold on, give me a moment. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Technology.
Yes. I'm going to pause that. Doop. Copy. Hold on. And paste. I'm going to send it to you too. Doop. Just so that way you can copy and paste it other places.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I suddenly have a new subscriber. Thank you,
Yay,
Andy.
probably Charles. Oh, Andy.
Well, no,
nice.
it's actually Andy Rector. So it's like, huh, cool.
Oh, cool.
So, I have my notebook, and
yes,
I have a page with questions.
Oh no, questions.
So let's get this started off with a few questions from me. Then I have some from the fans who commented on my first post about this interview, and then more from me. So the first one, how do you know if an idea is good?
That is a loaded question. You don't. When writing, you're probably going to come up with a lot of ideas, and you should definitely write all of them down, because you never know what idea might turn into something really great. But as far as, I mean, it also depends on how you define good. There is what might be interesting to you, there is what might be interesting to other people, and then there is what might be marketable in terms of publishing. And so sometimes those three things are all the same and they converge on an idea, which is the best idea possible. But you should not reject an idea just because you think nobody would care to hear about it. Because you'd be amazed at the people there are out there and the kinds of things people are interested in. And even if your idea or your topic is very niche, meaning it's not like the most popular thing out there, you're still probably going to find people who are going to enjoy the same kinds of things that you do. So generally, the ideas that I would pursue or that I would write about are ideas that mean something to me, that are either about a topic that I'm interested in or some way relate to my life, or usually the kinds of topics that you're going to write about are topics in a genre that you like to read in yourself. And so that's what you'd want to start with, and then from there, decide if it's something. Try to start writing about it. See if it's something that you're excited about every time you sit down to write.
Yeah.
And then do think about ways that it could be interesting, not even helpful to other people, because you should write for yourself. I publish for other people, but I write for me. I write because, there's Gadget. So this is Gadget, my other cat.
The Maine Coon.
She likes to jump. Yeah, she's part Maine Coon. I don't think she's not full Maine Coon. She's not big enough. She's very petite. She's going over to my desk because this is a convenient stepping stool to get onto my desk.
Well, I mean, Maine Coon cats can vary in size. I have two Maine Coons, and they're also petite.
Yeah, they can, but she's got the big tufts of fur between her toes, but her ears don't have the little ear tufts. So I think she's got some Maine Coon in her, but I doubt she's full-blood Maine Coon.
So she also kind of influences Sir Kipling in a sense with the poof.
Yeah, a little bit, though we got her just this summer. So Sir Kipling had been around a long time before Gadget came into our lives. Yes, I see you up there.
He's a cat.
So there's Gadget sitting on my desk. So it's supposed to be where my computer sits, but I prefer to write in my easy chair with my laptop on my lap, and so the cats sit there instead.
Cats sit on everything.
Of course they do. Everything is a cat chair. So anyway, how do you know if an idea is a good one? You don't really, but you should write about things that you're passionate about and things that excite you. And for me personally, part of why I enjoy writing so much is because I enjoy creating something that is going to touch other people's hearts. And so I'm probably going to choose topics that can more easily apply to and affect other people than stuff that's just my personal interests. For instance, I could write about entomology. I love bugs. I like to collect them. But not a lot of people like bugs or really care about them at all. So I'm probably going to write about something that is of more interest to more people. I love Harry Potter. I love the urban fantasy genre. I love magic and wizards and witches and cats. And a lot of people like those. So it was an easy choice to pick of what to write. But I mean, you have to write for yourself. So start out with something that you're excited about and that you like. And even if that's not something that you end up publishing, it's going to give you practice writing and practice developing your craft to where when you do write something that you feel like is something you want to publish, then you've had a lot of practice doing it.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the main reason why I ask is because in the course of me writing, I've had a lot of ideas that I come up with, but they fall flat because I can't think of enough to develop those ideas. However, I have one really good one, which I have yet to reveal to my audience.
Well, part of the writing process is developing those ideas, and some of them will fall flat, and that's fine because not everybody can write a story for every single idea they come up with, because we come up with, you know, a dozen ideas before breakfast, of course. So part of the whole process of seeing if it's a good idea, so to speak, is to get started on it and see where it goes. And if it does develop, then maybe write some of it and have your circle of friends or trusted beta readers that you share with and be like, hey, you know, what do you think of this? Does this seem interesting? Is this a topic you'd like to read more about? And if you write well and it's a topic that piques people's interest, then you'll hear back from them. And I think, you know, they'll be interested. So that's another way you can see if something that would interest other people is your beta readers and your fans that in some fashion, or family members if you don't have a readership base.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. What makes a good world when you're building it?
Oh gosh, you ask such open-ended, complicated questions, Katie. So I can't really fully answer that question. I'm pretty sure that question could be given to a panel of like 6 professional authors and they could take a whole hour talking about it. But part of the things that go into world building, the most important rule to remember is that it has to be internally consistent. So no matter what crazy or wild made up fantasy things you put in your world, or even if it's part of the mundane world that we live in today, all of your rules and principles and actors and forces and animals and nature in that world need to follow consistent principles that are consistent in that world. They don't have to be consistent with anything outside it or the real world, but just consistent within the world. So if you want your wizards to be able to, you know, block bullets with their hands or whatever, that's fine. You just need to figure out why they're able to do that. Is it some supernatural spell? Is it a force of nature? Is it a physics thing? Is it a property of the bullets? Is it a genetic ability in the wizards themselves? Is it an amulet they have? Like, figure out why it is that they can do it and find the limitations such that you can explain why other people can't do it, or in what situations wizards may or may not be able to do that. So you have to remain not just internally consistent, but also internally logical. Because even though books are made up, we as people enjoy stories better that follow logical principles that we understand as human beings. So even though you can, you know, mix up the logic sometimes, like I remember I read a book by Timothy Zahn once called Manta's Gift, I think, which was about these odd, like elephant-size creatures, but that have like kind of manta ray wings living on another planet where the whole atmosphere was gas. And so they're just floating in this gas, and they have their own culture and their own family units and rules and laws and stuff. And it was about some kind of spaceship coming in and discovering this planet and like interaction with humans. And I honestly don't remember what the ending was. It was probably, you know, a decade or more ago that I read it. But it was so strange and so out there to read about these creatures as if they were human beings, like they had their own emotions and feelings, and yet they were giant floating things with manta ray wings, you know? They weren't humans. But Timothy Zahn created his own logic and his own culture within that world, but he stayed internally consistent to living on a giant ball of gas with none of the human or pop culture cues that we would normally think of. So part of what comes into that is if you're writing a fantasy world, set in the Middle Ages, you can't use certain words that we use today, like, trying to think of an example that I just was annoyed that I couldn't use because I was writing a little bit this morning. And now I should have written it down. I totally can't think of it.
You can't use like abbreviations of things.
Well, some abbreviations is one of the things, or
I mean, in the Middle East,
I was just
had a different dialect as well.
Well, but that can be gotten around in the sense that if you're writing historical fiction, obviously you need to think about the traditional dialects that people would have had back then and research that. But if you're writing high fantasy or epic fantasy, you can create your own world. And oftentimes, even though you may want people to speak in a more formal fashion and so not use like the slang that teenagers use today because that wouldn't feel right, that wouldn't fit the situation, you don't have to use, Old English or whatever, because anything that might be hard for an English reader to read, like you don't want to confuse your reader by being too archaic.
Yeah, you don't.
No, I was thinking of a phrase. Go ahead.
You don't want to suddenly go from how you've been normally talking to Shakespeare.
Yeah, or something like that. No, the phrase I was just thinking of was the word security detail. In terms of a guild house in a big city who hires out mercenaries for security. The word detail probably wouldn't be used in that context in the time and place of like an epic fantasy setting. It's like detail, detail is in security. Detail is something that's like a modern usage or a modern description. And so I had to be like, I can't describe it like that. Yeah, like bodyguard or something. I probably wouldn't say security detail. So just thinking about the words that you use need to stay consistent with the culture and the people of the time. So it's little things like that. What makes a good world is not really a question you can ask in the sense that anything you come up with could be a good world. If you're a good writer and you're good at world building, any idea, even a world where everybody lives on the ceiling and gravity is reversed, would be a really fascinating world, assuming that you could develop a rich and diverse culture and world around it following internal principles and not making it seem like when you read stuff, you can tell it's like, oh, that's kind of stupid. That would never happen, right? That doesn't make sense. Like the readers know. You just have to make sure that you keep in mind your own internal principles and that you establish those at the beginning of your world building so that you know the principles that the world needs to follow.
Yeah. Do excuse the background noise. That's my
puppy
mom's
dogs.
Dog.
Oh, puppy dogs. That's okay.
She is the definition of an anxiety dog.
Mm.
And that means my stepdad and sister probably left. You in your cage, hon? Yeah, probably. I'll take you out after this interview. Anyway, we actually have two questions from Andy Rector in the comments. Hey guys, how does marketing your books as a self-published author compare to marketing through a traditional publisher?
No, that's a really good question. Well, these days, unfortunately, unless you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, or a few other really big name authors, in general, the marketing that your traditional publisher does for you is going to be pretty minimal. It didn't necessarily used to be this way. I don't know from personal experience, but from what I've read, 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet or social media like we do today. And so they didn't have the same resources or, personal contact you could make with your readers. And so the traditional publishers did a lot more of the advertising. Publishing is changing a lot. They have to because the world is changing. And I have heard, again, I'm not traditionally published, so I can really only speak on what I've heard from people and what I've read about the market, that in general, traditional publishers are no longer focusing on having a marketing budget for many books unless they're from already big name authors that they know are going to sell really well, or maybe a new author that they're really, you know, sure that they have a really good concept and they think this debut author is going to be a really big hit. There's a book that either just came out or is soon coming out called Mad, just M-A-D, by a gal, I think she's British, who was like $1 million publishing contract. And I'm sure they spent just as much money on the advertising for that. But in general, if you get picked up by a small press or even a medium-sized publisher, they're going to do very little advertising for you. And so in general, the advertising that you, the author, do traditionally published is going to be exactly the same that you do as an indie author. The only difference is that you're not going to have the backdoor access to your own ebook files, your own Amazon account. You know, you won't have personal access to those books, and so you may be somewhat limited as a traditionally published author in the giveaways that you can do, like the free ebooks you could provide, because the publisher is controlling that access as they do their own marketing. So you're still going to be using the same channels like social media, you know, maybe vlogging on YouTube, maybe having a fan group on Facebook, tweeting on Twitter. Whether you're traditionally or indie published, you should still build a newsletter list of your own fans so that you have access to directly contact your own fans and stuff like that. So really the only big difference I would see is that as a traditionally published author, yes, your publisher may do some advertising for you, and you won't have the same access directly to your account to do things like set up Amazon AMS ads or like Amazon freebie days or countdown deals. So different things that Amazon provides managers of their own accounts to promote their books. So depending on the size of the publisher, you may be able to work with them on that. Like many small publishers love working with their authors to help promote the books. But medium-sized to large publishers, from what I've heard, they do their own thing, and you just hope they put some effort into it. So,
yeah. Andy Rector also asks, do you use Scrivener? I don't know what this is, so I'm going to copy and
Scrivener. Scrivener.
Okay, Scrivener. I wasn't sure. I don't know. Scrivener.
Yes, I use Scrivener. It's amazing. I think every author should use it. There, plug done. The reason it costs about $40–45 to buy a software one-time fee. And the reason I like it is because I started out using Word, and I don't know, maybe they've added things to it since 4 or 5 years ago when I was using it. But basically with Word, you get one long linear document. It's very hard to move back and forth. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to find things. And you need a new document for every new subject or topic that you have. You know, a document for your notes, a document for your outlines, a document for your character profiles, etc. And that gets really annoying and confusing, switching between all those documents. Scrivener is one big program that has Word templates inside of it that you can easily, you've got like a navigation panel on the side that has all those different, your outline, your character sheets, your first draft, your second draft, your back matter, your front matter, the ebook, like all the different stuff all lined up there. It's very easy to navigate. It's got some different tools where you could compile documents. Excuse me. I have some tough book deadlines coming up, and I've not been getting a lot of sleep. But anyway, yeah, so I would definitely recommend Scrivener. There are some of its functions that I don't use that I don't think are that useful, like ebook compiling. I use Vellum for that because it's just a better program. It's more professional. But you can, I have published books using the ebook exporter using Scrivener. So for the amount you pay for it, I would highly recommend Scrivener over Word as a professional writer who writes a lot regularly, because it's just easier with the bulk of work and words that you're going to have. It's easier to navigate and easier to deal with and easier to outline and just organize your thoughts using a program like Scrivener rather than the linear document of Word.
Yeah, I personally, at the moment, am using Google Docs.
That's a really good one, actually. I was going to recommend that for people who couldn't afford to get Scrivener.
Yeah, I use Google Docs, and right now I have a folder from my project called Angel. You guys you viewers out there, get the name of it. I'm working on it with my fellow YouTube friend, Emerald Comet. and it's coming along well. You, my viewers, will eventually get a preview of it, because hopefully I'm going to turn it into an audiobook. Well, audio play, not book, but I am thinking of adapting the script that I'm writing into a book. So, yeah. But I'm using Google Docs right now because it's easier to use if you're long distance with someone and trying to work on the same project.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because you can sync back and forth and it's all online, so it just makes it a lot easier to work with other people. Actually, for my beta readers, I often post stuff on Google Docs, as opposed to sending a document. I mean, it depends on the beta reader and how they prefer to read, but I'm, at the moment, for When the Gods Laugh, which I'm working right now, I've got 2-3 beta readers who've just been reading it chapter by chapter as I post it on Google Docs. So.
Okay. From Bill Wolf, who commented on Facebook, who are the authors who have had the most influence on you?
Ugh, I could stop yawning. I'm so sorry. I was up at 7 this morning to try and get writing. Hi, kitties! So in case our viewers didn't get to see, there's some cats. Gizmo and Gadget. Gizmo is the calico with no tail, and Gadget is the big fluffy tail. They like to, I've got hardwood floors, so they like to run through the house, the little pitter-patter of their feet up and down the halls. So Bill Wolf asked, authors that had greatest influence on me. Our family is a Lord of the Rings family. My mom read The Hobbit to us when I was about 6, and read Lord of the Rings to us. I mean, she read the trilogy and The Hobbit to us many, many times growing up. So I think that it's C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis's Narnia series. Those are the books that I really grew up on and was, you know, given a pretty big positive impression with as a child. I mean, just the adventure and magic and like epic, amazing scale of all of that, all of Tolkien's world affected me deeply. And so I think Lewis and Tolkien probably are the biggest influence on me in the sense that they planted the seeds of my love of fantasy. Probably the next 2 biggest influences would be Rowling, of course, the Harry Potter series, and also a gal named Tamara Pierce, who wrote the Tortall series, and a bunch of others too. But Tortall is my favorite. Protector of the Small, Alana the Lioness, the Wild Mage series, etc.
I actually read the Protector of the Small series.
No, go ahead. That's my favorite. Kel is my favorite of all of her characters. Well, Kel and Allie too, George Cooper's daughter, and the Trickster's Choice and Trickster's Queen pair. But anyway, she writes young adult fiction, kind of, I would say high fantasy. I don't know, it might be high fantasy, I guess. It's in a medieval type world with magic. And just the amount of, you know, it really shaped me growing up. And just made me love reading and love adventure and stories and made me want to create adventures of my own. So if I had to make a short list, I'd say Tolkien, Lewis, Rowling, and Pierce.
Okay. Charles Burnham says, hey, Lydia, favorite author?
Oh, gosh. Well, that's not a question you can ask authors, is who their favorite author is. I don't have a favorite author.
Fair.
The 4 that I just mentioned that were the greatest influence, I would definitely say their books are some of my most beloved. But if you held my toes over the fire, I could mention a few more. Not one, I don't have a favorite author, but I could mention a few more I'm a big fan of. Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game. Yeah, he's amazing. Robin McKinley, who wrote The Blue Sword and The Hero's Crown and Sunshine. Those are 3 of my absolute favorite fantasy books. You should check out Robin McKinley. I think you'd really, really like her. Robin McKinley, I think probably Hero's Crown was the first one of hers I read, and then I read The Blue Sword, and then I read Sunshine. She also does a lot of fairy tale retellings, like Beauty and the Beast and... what was the one she did? Sleeping Beauty retellings, which are pretty cool. Well, let me see what's on my shelf. Oh, mostly Tamara Pierce. What else do I got up there? The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a really good book. Artemis Fowl. Ooh, that's a really good series by Owen Colfer. Artemis Fowl is amazing. Got the Harry Potter series, The Last Unicorn. What else do I have? Black Beauty. Oh, the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. I read that when I was a kid. It's a little bit, I still love it, but it's a little bit, amateur isn't the right word. You just enjoy it more when you're a little bit younger, maybe. I don't know, some people. My mother-in-law still loves it. I guess since I've read them all, I don't really go back and reread them, but I love the Redwall books by Brian Jacques when I was a kid. It's all about animals, like animals as humans. There's an abbey of mice and a mountain that a badger ruled, and they have all sorts of adventures. So yeah, I'd probably go with those.
Okay. Charles also asks, who inspired you to be an author?
I think a lot of that goes back to the 4 authors I mentioned from Bill's question, who were just my greatest influences. Reading books, I guess I wouldn't say who inspired me to be an author, but rather what? When you read and are transported to a different world, like the immense joy of that is a feeling that nothing else can compare to.
Yeah.
And I just was inspired to create my own worlds. Just the hope that I could give someone else that amount of joy and enjoyment in something that I wrote is a big goal of mine. So I guess it was more the experience of reading that inspired me to be a writer more than a single person. But I definitely look up a lot to J.K. Rowling in the kind of author she is today, which is she's very generous with her money. She donates millions, literally millions of her fortune to charity. She's not just, some other celebrity. She actually is trying to get things done with the proceeds of the Harry Potter books. Oh, don't yawn. You're going to get me yawning too.
Hey, you started it.
That's true. I did start it.
Yawning is contagious.
It is. It is. I don't know. I'd say my mom inspired me to be a writer. She is a grammar Nazi. And also a huge lover of books, and she instilled the love of books in us. And my own imagination. Like, I've been writing stories in my head since I was a little kid. Like, I don't know if all kids do this because I'm only me. I don't know what's going on in your head, but since I was a little kid, like, anytime I wasn't actively doing something else, I was making up stories in my head and like living them out. And seeing where the characters went, and sometimes pretending the stories with like my siblings and stuff. So
yeah, stories are always fun to create. Bill Wolf asked a second question: what do you hope your writing accomplishes, apart from providing an enjoyable reading experience?
Stories is how we understand the world around us and how we understand ourselves. We tell stories to understand things, and we read stories to understand things. So I hope that the stories I write make people think about more things than just themselves, or think about more things than their own close and safe little situation. So I guess expanding people's horizons, getting them thinking about larger questions in life, not necessarily to find the ultimate truth, because, I mean, I think I know the ultimate truth, but so does pretty much everybody else. So I can't really say that my ultimate truth is any more ultimate than anybody else's. I think mine is, but my job as a writer isn't to tell everybody else, rather to present truths that I've come upon in my journey in such a way that it may provoke thought. It may challenge them to think about a bigger picture, or to think about things from someone else's perspective besides their own, or to think about things in a new way that they might not have normally thought about. And so, just to provoke thought, to provoke feeling, reading books and stories, I mean, it's made me a braver person, because even though they're made up, they are archetypes of the people that we meet in our everyday lives and the people that inspire us. And so they can be very inspiring. you know, people like Harry Potter. He may be completely fictional, but he's based on an archetype and on a type of person who in our lives and who we would want to be in our lives. And so I hope to inspire people and set a good example and, yeah, hopefully give them lots of fun.
Okay. Jason James asked, Book 4 concluded with such an open end. What can we expect from Book 5? I personally have not made it to Book 4 yet.
So no spoilers.
Book 3.
Well, Jason, you can expect that the stakes will be raised, that certain characters that show up in Book 4 will return and some of them won't. That a certain character who, so I'm trying to describe this so that Jason knows what I'm talking about without spoiling it for you. A certain character who left unexpectedly at the end of Book 4 will be coming back in the series, but she may not show up back in Book 5. In Book 4, after the conclusion, you know, obviously there's going to be a battle or some conflict at the end of each book. And so the conflict at the end of Book 4, the immediate conflict goes away, but is not gone. It's just kind of brewing. And so I think a lot of Book 5 is going to involve Lily and Sebastian figuring out the larger picture and what to do next and how everything ties in together, discovering larger secrets about the situation that they weren't aware of. So the awareness of the scale and scope of the stakes is expanding. I know that's all really vague and
it's all really vague, maybe because I haven't reached Book 4 yet.
Well, there's plenty of people who haven't read Book 4, but for people who've read Book 4, they'll get some of my references. And you know, honestly, I have a general idea of what happens. I know how everything ends, but I have not plotted out Book 5 yet in detail. I need to finish. Oh, stop it, girl. Oh, I need to finish When the Gods Laughed before I write the next Lily Singer's books. And the plan is to write the next 4 books all in one big sitting. Well, it won't be one big sitting. It'll probably be a year. I hope to write the next 4 books more or less in 2018 and then start releasing them probably one every 3 months or so in 2019. So that way people won't have to wait quite as long in between books. So we'll see. I might have a traditional publishing deal happening at some point in 2019 or 20. I don't know. But some people have asked me to do stuff, and so I'm just waiting to hear back.
Well, I mean, aren't you self-published?
I am, but I have been asked by a New York Times. I've been asked by a New York Times bestseller, John Ringo, to co-author a young adult book series with him, and he's published by Baen Books. So if I end up doing this series together with him, then I'll be a hybrid author, both self-published and traditionally published.
Hey,
so
and then you can
we'll see how that
then
works.
You can properly answer the question that was asked beforehand.
Or at least with more experience. So.
Yeah. Celia Cleveland, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, asked, like, she was recently given the advice to keep a separate notebook for each idea that she's developing. How do you feel about it? Do you agree? And what are your methods for keeping your story straight?
It sounds like Celia, hi Celia, by the way. Celia is very awesome. She got my books, I think, in 2016 at Marble City Comic Con, if I recall correctly. She's a pretty cool gal. She does some voice acting as well. So Celia, it sounds like, is handwriting things, because she says notebooks, and I do not handwrite a single thing. I hate handwriting. I mean, like, I'll write letters if I have to, but I'd much rather send an email. My thought process, because I think so fast, outstrips my ability to write by hand, so it's just easier for me to type. So what I do is on Scrivener, I have a separate Scrivener file for each universe. The Lily Singer series is all in one Scrivener file, because even though they're separate books, they're all one
universe.
Gentle Witch. Yeah, and Accidental Witch is in the same Scrivener file as the Lily Singer books. Because it's just easier. I have to go back and forth constantly to check my facts and make sure I'm staying consistent. So it's easier if it's all in one file. But I have a completely separate file for When the Gods Laughed and a couple other separate files for some other stories that I've started. So I also have a document that I jot down story ideas in. And usually just a paragraph or two if an idea just comes to me randomly and it seems interesting, but obviously I don't have time to work on it because I have other writing deadlines. I'll just jot down the idea and everything I can think about it in the moment and just date it and then leave it there. And I may or may not ever come back to those, but who knows, maybe I will. If you're handwriting, I would absolutely recommend keeping a separate notebook for each. I mean, if it's just one book each, like I don't know if Celia's at the point where she has a multi-book series, but I would definitely say for each universe or each idea process to have a different notebook, or at least if you're on the computer, different files. It's pretty easy for me to keep things straight in the sense that the stories that I'm working on right now are all pretty diverse. You've got your urban fantasy with Lily Sager, epic fantasy with When the Gods Laughed, and I've got a couple other small projects that I kind of work on and off, but they're all different genres too. I've got something that's a dystopian, science fiction dystopian story and stuff like that, but I think it probably would be difficult to work on multiple urban fantasy books that are completely separate worlds, like different universes at the same time. That would probably be pretty difficult.
Yeah. Andy Rector also asks, recommendations for finding proofreaders and editors?
Get recommendations from your fellow authors who you respect. Books that you've read that seem well edited. Obviously, a lot of the large, big name traditional authors are not going to respond to your emails. So that's not necessarily what I mean. Don't go emailing J.K. Rowling and ask her who her editor is. But in the indie author community, there are a lot of websites and communities on social media that you can join and ask those questions. For instance, Kentuckiana Authors on Facebook is a Facebook group for authors in kind of the Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee-ish region that I'm a part of, and they're a really good resource. There's also an Alliance of Young Adult Authors for young adult fiction that I'm a part of. There's 20 Books to 50K is a really big professional indie author group to ask like pretty technical, deep publishing questions in, and I've seen a lot of recommendations there, but they also will just even have documents in their groups with recommended cover artists and editors and such. So I'd go join writer groups, not necessarily a writing group, but groups of indie authors, because there is a difference between people who are just dabbling in writing and people who are professional authors. So the professional authors are going to have the experience of who they've worked with in the past, who have good prices, who's reliable, who gets back to them on time, etc. And that's who I would look for. I can personally recommend JD Book Services. Josiah Davis is the editor, and he edited Accidental Witch for me. Probably put his website, jdbookservices.com, I believe. Let's put this in my fan page, and hopefully that pulls up the website. Services. So JD Book Services is Josiah. He's who I use for Accidental Witch, and he'll probably be editing When the Gods Laughed as well. So he charges very reasonable rates and works quickly, so I could definitely recommend him.
Okay.
Now, an important thing is to understand the different types of editing. I don't have time to go over it now, but you should research different types of editing, the difference between editing and proofreading, the difference between proofreading and beta reading. So there are different kinds and different editors for different reasons. So it's good to be aware of that before you start hiring people.
Yes. It is officially 12:30, and I mean, I still have questions.
Oh, maybe we need to schedule another interview.
Yes, when there is time. So
yeah, maybe get back to me after my big, oh, well, I guess I can go ahead and reveal it here. I've already kind of told some people about it, but We're redesigning the Lily Singer book covers. It's sad, I know, but it has to be done, partially because my old illustrator waved goodbye and is no longer doing illustrations, so I can't really continue in that same vein. So we're redesigning them. They're going to be fun and just as fun and bright as the old ones, and we're doing a big ebook sale the first weekend in November. The first book's going to be free. Now, these are ebooks, of course, not paperbacks. The first book's going to be free. All the rest are going to be discounted to 99 cents for the weekend. So if you're an ebook reader and know friends who like reading ebooks, you can take advantage of that and share it around with your friends. And so after that, like around mid-late November, I may definitely have time for another interview and all that craziness is over.
Yeah.
So, but thank you very much for having me. It was very nice to chat and fun to get to talk about some of these different Katie, and hopefully your fans and my fans enjoy watching.
Yes. Thank you for joining me, because of course you're an author and you're awesome, and I mean, not too many people, or, well, I don't really know too many authors personally in a sense, but you know, I was slightly nervous asking because I know you're a very busy person.
I mean, I write for me, but I publish for you guys. So I wouldn't be publishing if I didn't want to interact with you all and chat about these things. I enjoy talking about books and about writing. For people watching this, if you don't already know me, be sure to go check out my website, lydiasherrer.com. We can drop a link in Katie's
it's
YouTube.
In the description.
Yeah, in the description.
Your YouTube channel and your website is linked in the description below.
Katie has it covered. She knows what she's doing. All my books are available on Amazon, and yeah, you might catch me at some event near you sometime. You can always go to my events page on my website to see where I'm going to be next. So, thanks so much, Katie, for having me.
Yes, and I hope.
Are we done?
Hold on. I hope all of my listeners. I hope you like the sound of my voice and subscribe.